You can all hear me okay. Just to extend my welcome to techUK's Tech and Innovation Summit this year. My name is Laura Foster and I am the Associate Director for Tech and Innovation. And with my fantastic colleague Sarah, we lead on quantum at techUK. It's really hard to believe that the Tech and Innovation Summit is now in its third year. And what's really great about this conference, especially being near the end of the year, is that we get to reflect on the progress that has been made. And now that it's been around for a few years, we get to reflect not only on the progress this year, but also in the last few years. And if I cast our mind back to the first ever Tech and Innovation Summit that we did, that year there had only just been the National Quantum Strategy published. The UK was a leader in quantum, but a lot of the things that we were talking about were still very nascent when it came to quantum and quantum policy here in the UK. But since then, a lot has progressed. Not only do we have the National Quantum Strategy, we have the quantum missions, and we've also very recently seen quantum included in the industrial strategy and over 600 million recently announced for compute. And not only that, quantum was at the heart of the UK and US prosperity deals. So quantum is very much leading UK tech policy. But what does all that mean for the people who are in the room today? Tech leaders who may be quantum experts, but you may not be quantum experts. And that is what we are here to discuss. We're here to put quantum and explain quantum in a way to understand how it is going to tangibly impact your business. And since it is techUK, we very much focused on quantum commercialization since the very beginning of our work on quantum. And so that is where we are going to start the panel today. And thankfully, I'm not here to do all that myself because that is quite a lot of topics to cover. And so I am absolutely delighted to be joined on stage today by some fantastic experts who have been working in the quantum realm, so to speak, for many years now. So I'm joined by Tom Newby, who is the Deputy Director for the Office for Quantum within the Departments for Science, Innovation and Technology. By Dr. Kirill Pishkin, who is the partner of Quantum Exponential, a fantastic VC firm, but also does a lot to convene the quantum ecosystem together. Gemma Church, who is the quantum community leader, a fantastic quantum scale-up now, not even startup, Riverlane. And Andrew Lamb, who is the CTO and co-founder of a really innovative company that's come onto the scene in more recent years, Delta G. And Andrew, it's actually you that I'm going to start the conversation with today. So as mentioned, this panel has got a strong focus on commercialization. But it's important to note that there's different quantum technologies. I think people often think of just quantum compute, and they are on very different paths when it comes to being commercially ready. So are you able to maybe start by giving a brief definition as to what these different quantum technologies are, and maybe which one will reach commercialization first, in your opinion?
Well, I'll start with the second question first because I don't decide to follow any form of logic. Now, I personally would, of course, be biased. My company is a quantum sensing company, so I'd love to say that we'll be the first to market, but there are other quantum companies out there. If I was to be a pedant, there's actually quantum technologies that have been in place for years, decades even. Quantum lasers, for example, are a quantum technology. What we're doing now is we're looking at the second quantum resolution. So can we repurpose those capabilities to move quantum forward, to use these more in-depth effects? So in terms of what technologies that are out there, I mean, you mentioned the quantum missions. The quantum missions are a pretty great framing narrative for the types of technologies available. One of those missions is focused on quantum computing. That's one of 5. Yeah. So there's another 4 which have nothing to do, I wouldn't say have nothing to do with it, but are not directly related. So you've got information, communications, you have healthcare dependent technologies, you have sensing, you have position navigation and timing. Those are broadly the focus of the 5 missions. So when you start to talk about quantum and people only ever think about computing, that is a pretty big slap in the face for the rest of the community. And it's actually quite a serious problem for us that we saw when we we formed the startup. All of the capabilities are put in place, all the support is put in place for quantum computing companies. So if you want to join any incubators, if you want to join any of the training programs, they aren't applicable. So that's my minor rant against quantum computing. That's not to say I have anything against it, because it's an important part. But if I start to look broader, so quantum sensing, in my opinion, is the capability that's going to reach market the soonest. In fact, there's a spin out from the University of Nottingham called Circa Magnetics that are already doing this. They use optically pumped magnetometers to act as they're marketing it as a replacement MRI. So how can you move beyond the MRI, which also started in Nottingham, by the way, to a capability which, rather than requiring somebody to be locked in place with a helmet on their head, that can just move around. Can you wear it? Can you scale these things up? And they've been doing this for 5-6 years now, and they've got these devices in market. So in terms of who's going to be the first to market, we already have an answer. But when you move past that, there are other sensor capabilities. So Delta G is a quantum gravity gradiometry company, and we're taking the outcome of the quantum hub research and deploying our capability into the real world. So that's utilizing the physics that has been well proven and well demonstrated, well matured now, and merging that with engineering capabilities. And really that's something where there's quite an interesting intersection that I personally think should come in sooner in the academic mindset. Where can you actually bring productionization, systems engineering, electronic engineering, these sorts of capabilities into the lab to actually speed up the production? I hope I answered your questions.
Perfect, thank you. And Gemma, I'm going to go to you next to build upon that. So you actually part of the quantum compute value chain, but your job is actually to communicate that. So my question to you is, how do you go about communicating these timelines of quantum, maybe also into those established industries who are going to be the first users of this technology?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that we build at Riverlane is trust. So we partner with more than 60% of the quantum companies in the world, quantum computing companies, sorry, I'll clarify that. And I think trust is the big thing. You see a lot of hype within the industry, certainly, about people claiming that we've got applications on the horizon. To be perfectly clear, we don't have those applications yet. We're currently in something called a kiloquop regime. And I've just broken one of my fundamental rules of being a communicator and just thrown some jargon at you. So let me break that down. That actually comes from the UK quantum strategy. So if you look at mission 1, it says in 2035, we want quantum computers to be able to do 1 trillion error-free quantum operations, 1 trillion. At the moment, we can do about 1,000, which is the kiloquop, which means 1,000 error-free quantum operations. That error-free part is really important, and that's what Riverlane, the company I work at, works on. So when we're going out and talking to people, it's about explaining actually the complexity of a quantum computer. And that's one of the big issues that I think I have, is sometimes you're comparing apples to oranges. There are lots of different quantum computers out there. Which one's going to be the one to win the race to utility? I'd argue probably that we'll have multiple winners, but that's another conversation. So I think it's really about, as I say, kind of breaking through this jargon and understanding how to benchmark and actually understand these systems is incredibly difficult, because these machines are arguably the most complicated machines we're ever going to build. How do we explain that to the general public in a way that's understandable, but also conveys that complexity of what we're trying to do, but more importantly, why we're trying to do it? Because if these machines, or I should say when these machines work, they're going to be solving some of the most fundamental problems that humans haven't cracked yet.
And Kirill, coming to you, you've got the extra difficult challenge of communicating this to the VC community. How do you go about doing that?
Well, first I wanted to add to what Andrew said, and well, first of all, we have a portfolio of 8 companies, and some of them are sensors. And as Andrew said, sensors are probably the closest to commercialization. So apart from Delta G, which is our portfolio company as well, we have Silaton, for example. They all presented, by the way, last week at our Investor Day. So Silaton, for example, they are already today shipping the trial eye sensors. So, for example, if you go to Specsavers, that massive machine which sits there where they take your test, so it's a replacement for that technology, which is cheaper, mobile. Obviously, some governments are interested. I think Australian government is particularly interested because it's for the native population, which is important. So here's one application of ophthalmology. We have another application, another company which is coming from Scotland, and they have application for real-time blood scanning. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm a doctor, but not the right type of doctor. So it's hard for me to explain that, but this is basically a replacement to MRI, but live. So if you have, for example, a stroke or some problems, you can take a real-time scan of your brain, and that's what their sensors, photonic-based sensors, can do. Another portfolio company uses sensors for detection of gas particulates for specific environmental applications. Here, the big investor was Schlumberger, so it's important for the energy sector. And then, of course, compute is the most. I don't want to say hyped, but the most exciting for many applications, the ones who's been given a lot of attention in press. And there we also have companies which are already moving into the application stage. So, for example, another portfolio company, Oxford Quantum Circuits, I think they work with Riverlane in terms of deploying their technology in data centers which are commercially available. That same company today is working with NVIDIA, deploying first ever New York data center, just around the corner from Wall Street, specifically targeting those applications. They're also working with NVIDIA on NVIDIA Quantum Link and NVQ Link, specifically to combine AI and quantum, because those applications work very well together. And in fact, although I am not a doctor, I understand that quantum and AI complement each other very well. So again, for example, if you look at healthcare, which is probably the second largest application in compute, is you could use, for example, AI algorithm to create a model. So you analyze the existing drugs, you create a model, and then you create quantum to match the molecular composition to fit into this model. And it works very well together because quantum is really good at solving complex problems almost instantaneously, as if they're working in a parallel universe. And on the other hand, you have AI who helps. And so AI basically good with large data sets. Quantum is good with sparse data sets. And that's a nice complement. Plus, there is a huge advantage in terms of the energy efficiency. But maybe I'm taking too much time to talk about all this.
No, that's it's really great to hear some of those emerging applications. It's really important on that route to commercialization. But I think maybe to just push you, do you think the VC sector understands what the opportunity is?
I would put it that VC sector understands, but afraid to touch it. Because if you look at, say, hardware against software, you have longer return on investment period in hardware and quantum in particular, let's say 7 to 10 years. If you invest in AI or fintech or software, that's shorter period, that's 3 to 5 years. So of course, it's less risk to invest in AI. And a nice statistics for you that this year in the first half, I think 53% of all venture investments went into AI. In US, 63%. So almost 2/3 goes into AI. And which is why, of course, quantum is an opportunity because, as I said, they work together very well. But if you put together the market cap of quantum computing companies listed, that's going to be maybe 40 billion, which is less than 1% of NVIDIA. So opportunity is huge. McKinsey puts it in trillions. Energy efficiency is huge. It's a big return on capital because it's a foundational technology. You get 5 or 10 times return from the government perspective, yet it's underappreciated. But the reason why it's so difficult is, as I said, it's very risky because of technology itself, hard to understand. It's long return period, which is why you do have some deep tech funds, which, by the way, is not very many around. And even they're afraid to go hard onto quantum computing or quantum technologies because they need to diversify their risk. And last thing, we are helping this because we are raising a large dedicated fund focusing on UK, focusing on quantum technologies to help this.
And it's exactly what the UK needs, in my humble opinion.
Thank you.
Tom, just to wrap up these opening set of questions, I think I almost need to take a step back here and say that from a policy and from a governmental perspective, the UK was actually really ahead of its curve. We were one of the first nations to have a national quantum strategy, and then also the development of the Office for Quantum, in which you said was also quite world leading and still is world leading. How do you think that kind of policy arm helps communicate within government and within the wider tech industry the importance of quantum to UK Tech PLC?
Well, firstly, just testing 1, 2, 3. Well, firstly, just to completely agree that we've benefited so much from that kind of first mover advantage, and I think it actually predates the national quantum strategy that you saw a couple of years ago, but actually we have a national program that's now been up and running for 11 years, and basically that was founded through a series of kind of researchers and innovators in the space saying we could be more than the sum of our parts if we have a national effort, and that's been funded through various governments over the decades. And I think that it means I'm in quite a privileged position as a policymaker to be able to say, look at the ecosystem we've got. It's genuinely world leading. You can look at any range of metrics from private investment, number of companies, research quality. We're up there just behind the US usually, and certainly leading in Europe. And I think what that means is the opportunity is obvious. And when you combine that with the discussion we've just had about the applications that will apply across different sectors, it's foundational, it will be transformative. It's a bit of a no-brainer from a government perspective. I think the big question we're grappling with now is what next? So the work we've done through the programme to fund key research and translational work has been really right for the first 11 years. The same approach won't be right for the next decade. So the approach that we signalled in the industrial strategy is a shift to scale and a shift to adoption. Now that will look quite differently depending on whether they're talking about sensing or computing, and so we're thinking really carefully about that. But that is the kind of things that we're working through, and we've got really strong political backing from this government, from the Technology Secretary, the Minister for Science, but also we've seen really great engagement right across government as well. So in some ways, I think it makes it quite a pleasure to do this job because we've got such a thriving ecosystem we can point to.
You've actually teed us up very nicely there, so thank you for that. Let's move to the what's next question there, and how we do need to start to have a change in approach. And in my opinion, that approach has to be global. So my question, and Tom, I'm going to go back to you on this before I go to others, is where do you see the UK's position within this emerging global quantum value chain? And I know your team was quite influential, or at least involved in the UK-US prosperity deal and how quantum is mentioned in that. So where do you see the emerging role of the UK in that value chain?
Yeah, I would say that our ecosystem is really internationally integrated. That's been a feature right from the start. As with any emerging technology, it's not something one country can do alone. And I think what we've seen in the last few years is a shift from ad hoc collaborations at kind of research group, company level, to really kind of strategic partnerships commercially with a lot of our kind of promising startups and scale-ups moving into second, third, fourth markets and doing that really well, but also at government to government level. And what we're trying to do there is kind of unlock barriers to that collaboration happening, whether it's academic, whether it's commercial, and think about where our government programs can be more than the sum of our parts. So whether that's thinking about benchmarking machines, and we're all grappling with this collective challenge of what looks like the most performant machine now, and what will that look like in 10 years' time? Can we join up on that endeavour? Or whether it's thinking about addressing challenges in our supply chains, being more resilient. And if you look across the world, we've all got different strengths in our ecosystems. The UK is a very broad, but we're not going to be able to build every element of the supply chain and all the infrastructure we need here. And so partnering is going to be critical. So Laura, you mentioned the US partnership earlier this year. Quantum was one of 3 pillars of this totemic partnership. It was really, really an important part. We have made real inroads in our partnerships with Europe. So the UK is now reassociated with Horizon, accessing Horizon quantum calls, which we weren't for the first couple of years after Brexit, which is really important for the ecosystem. And just in the last year, we've signed a memorandum of cooperation with Japan, one of several that we've done. So I think what we're moving from is a kind of general consensus international collaboration is important, and seeing that to more and more strategic partnerships.
Fantastic. And really glad you mentioned supply chains there, and I am going to come back to that. But I do like to throw a controversial question in every now and again. Gemma, a lot of that conversation was actually talking about UK comparative strength and how we have been quite strong in the quantum ecosystem 10 years plus now. But as we move to commercialization, as we're starting to see strategic partnerships, as we're starting to see other nations or geopolitical blocks invest more in quantum, has the UK got a bit complacent?
Good question. I would say not just because Tom sat here, but because I think one of our strengths is in collaboration. So we have had an awful lot of collaboration centred by the UK government. There was a mention of Japan, for example. Aside from China, where we're not exactly sure how much they're investing in quantum, they are now the leading kind of public funder for quantum computing, followed very closely by the US, who is a lot more established in its program, and then the UK. So we're up there with the top three from that investment point of view. But I think collaboration-wise, when you look at efforts like the NQCC, based in Oxford, they're bringing together, and they've been bringing together for a while, people who should be competing. And I think that's a really important point to make, is that actually, at the moment, we don't know what a quantum computer will look like in 10 years' time. And I don't just mean what qubits it's going to use. So when we think about qubits, there are lots of different types. They have advantages and disadvantages. At Riverlane, we're working across all these qubit types, and it's a really interesting space, an exciting space to be in at the moment. But thinking about that sort of side of things is what the NQCC does very well, is it's bringing together not just those qubit players, but also people like Riverlane, who are specialising in error correction to make sure all those qubits effectively behave well and do what they're meant to do, but then also bringing in the algorithm side as well. So you've effectively got this three kind of tier. I sometimes call it a sandwich, and I get told off by the scientists for saying this. But you've got the algorithms, you've got the qubits, and you've got the error correction in the middle. And the fact that I think the UK government has been very forward-thinking and actually focusing on the entire quantum computing stack is a huge benefit, because, you know, as we heard from the fireside chat as well, now's the time to start picking those technologies and those specialisms where we really need to push forward and really kind of back those specialisms. So I think the UK is doing brilliantly on the collaboration front. I now am very excited to see what it's going to do on the specialisation front and what technologies it's going to pick next.
Yeah, no, a little bit. Can you hear me? A little bit of advertisement for the gentleman on the panel before us. So Dr. Jacob Mockhammer, I think, from Tony Blair Institute. They published an excellent report 2 days ago, absolutely brilliant. Basic idea that it's UK's race to lose, and after early start and early success with the great government support and very intelligently placed clusters, quantum hubs in the UK, and all the support that go into the R&D, it's now time to act, and because we could lose this race. And it's almost a unique opportunity, again, coming back to this UK-US quantum task force. It's very important to coordinate with the US. They are the leader in AI, and it's very important to work with them to benefit from the, not to the last degree from the capital that they have. For example, I think it's 31 billion they've announced in terms of investing in this quantum initiative. So working with the US, but again, coming back to the Tony Blair Institute, it's actually the report which was published jointly with William Hague and Tony Blair, which is quite interesting in the foreword, because William Hague, he is former McKinsey consultant, but better known as the former Tory leader. So he is now the Chancellor of Oxford University, and earlier this year they published a report of the quantum a potential quantum impact on UK economy, saying that it could be 7% productivity gap. It could be additional 212 billion, I think, out of memory, a benefit to the UK. But again, their point was that it's UK's to lose. So they actually put it not in the opportunity, but as a risk section. So again, 2 days ago, they published this report saying that jointly, again, William Hague and Tony Blair talking about this opportunity or unique moment today that UK needs to move to commercialization. Like Sir Ian said on his panel before, it's very important to understand what we're good at and focus on those niches, and not just support research, but make sure that we commercialize it, because we have seen too many examples where the US companies coming in and just acquiring, like Oxford Ionics in September, like nanoscience division of Oxford Instruments earlier in the year. Lead funders for our companies, again, the US. As I said, Schlumberger, for example, one example. German Robert Bosch for another. Quantinuum from Honeywell. So it's not the UK bias, unfortunately.
Building on that, I'm going to come back to you. Let me word this in a different way. What do you need to scale in the UK? If we're not necessarily complacent, but it's our race to lose, what do you need so we don't lose that?
So I was in a strange situation where I started my PhD about a month before the quantum program started. So I've seen the entire history of the quantum program from various levels. And the others on the panel are correct. We started in a very strong position. The program started, I think it was the first in the world. The £1 billion commitment was considerable. And that really put us into a strong position. What we have seen in recent years with the change of government in particular is a reduced commitment towards some of that things. So when I look into the funding landscape, particularly for the R&D activities, it's quite sparse and there's no real confidence about what's coming next. And this is what I keep hearing from a lot of people, is that there's funds out at the moment, they've closed, but we don't know where the next amount of money is coming from. And that's because it's waiting the funding review. So what you need to secure your company's future, but as well as the strong talent you need to grow, is you need that level of security to know where the next stage of money is coming from. But this does expand beyond just the government. We closed our seed round about a month ago. That was off the back of nigh on a year, I think, work by our CEO to build out that round. And something we saw time and time again in the VC community, not quantum exponential, fortunately, but a lot of places that claim to be deep tech aren't. They don't understand what deep tech is. They come in. We had one company come and ask for a spec sheet. We don't have a product. We're a deep tech pre-seed company. They don't appreciate what's coming, and that was time and again the problem. So you actually have an issue in terms of funding, both privately and publicly. I've been informed that it's potentially the worst time to ever raise money as a private investor for a startup company. So the short answer is continued funding is what we need to keep going. But there is a bit more than that. So something that I'm consistently seeing is there's a skill gap. Some of my favorite statistics are, in the 10 years of the quantum technology program, there have been, 11 years now, about 500 PhD students trained across the entire program, which sounds fantastic. But when you consider there's about 50 quantum companies in the world, in the UK, there's lots of larger companies that have their own quantum divisions. There's people that stay in academia. There's people that leave the sector entirely. That 500 potential candidates very quickly drops off. And when you look at the complexity of some of these systems, particularly when it comes to more in-depth research activities, like in quantum computing, the people you need are just not there. And that's going to be an increasing problem. We have to develop our own ways of developing these skills of de-skilling activities, but that's part of where the role of universities stays. Universities need to train these individuals. Maybe you don't need PhD level, maybe you need dedicated masters or apprenticeships or those types of things. But even building past that, we can think about the near-term commercialization, we can think about the longer-term commercialization in quantum computing, or about what's next after that. So you can't just discount the investment in university research, because that's where these whole ideas started. And if you're thinking about what's coming in the even further future, you need to fund both the application as well as the fundamental. Otherwise, you're going to run out of that knowledge pipeline very, very quickly.
And it is that kind of, the people that we're going to need in the future today are choosing the lower levels. So it's how can you get that pipeline of more people into core STEM so that they see this as a valuable career. But I am going to play devil's advocate just a little bit. PhDs are very, very important for this sector, but looking at the Quantum Skills Task Force, which was done by DSIT and techUK were part of that, it isn't just about PhDs, and actually scaling is about those technician roles and how actually there's more than one pipeline into a career in quantum. I'm going to come back to you on that, and then Gemma, I can see that you're nodding, so I'm going to come to you as well.
So I completely agree. Technicians are invaluable. One of my co-founders, Jonathan Winch, he doesn't have a PhD. He joined us as a technician after finishing his fourth year project. But he's developed those skills so incredibly well. He's well beyond PhD level skill. But he just came a different route. So I completely agree, technicians are invaluable, but you still need the routes into them. And the problem is that a lot of things like technician roles are still funded via research grants. So if you want a technician to be in situ to either support the work or develop their own skill sets, you need the perpetuation of funding. But it even goes broader than that, is that where can you take these traditionally academic disciplines and move them into a non-academic setting? Yeah. Can you do apprenticeships? Can you do vocational courses? Now that's obviously where a company starts to have to factor into it, where we'll have to develop the courses ourselves, build up the funding ourselves. But that's a partnership between industry, research, and government. It's a broader thing. It's a very interesting skills base that you can develop in a non-traditional way.
Gemma?
Yeah, I was going to point out as well, I think, the importance of reskilling. So when we think about quantum computing, you think, I need a PhD in quantum physics. No, you don't. So actually, particularly within the work we're doing at River Lane, actually, they're classical problems. We're trying to build machines, the nuts and bolts of we need engineers, we need software developers, we need people with a lot of classical skills who can be retrained to work in quantum. So looking at QEC, quantum error correction specifically, which we work in, we've got a report coming out ourselves. It seems to be the season for it in a couple of weeks, the QEC report 2025. And we've done a lot of research into actually the skill sets that will be needed going forward. And looking specifically at error correction, we've got about 400, 500 people working globally in this field at the moment. So by 2035, we're going to need between 5,000 to 16,000. That's a huge increase. We're not going to get all those from PhDs. So it's really important, I think, as well, to reach out and actually get people who are already working in STEM and getting them at this kind of top end to actually start considering a career in quantum, because there's going to be a huge skills deficit going forward.
I'll come to you, but very, very quickly, Gemma, I realised we jumped into this and we didn't even define what quantum error correction is. So do you want to do a 30
I'll do a quick 30
yeah.
So basically, qubits, as I've said, are the foundation of every quantum computer. You need those to run a quantum computer. But they're very, in my head, they're very naughty. So if you look at them the wrong way, if it's a bit too hot or there's vibration, they break down because they're very prone to errors. So basically what happens is the computation can't take place. As I mentioned before, the hugest machines, the biggest machines at the moment, can do about 1,000 operations before errors take over and consume them. So what error correction does, clues in the name, is that it corrects these errors. So it's a case of finding the errors, working incredibly quickly and with incredible accuracy in order to correct those errors the minute that they occur. Not the minute they occur, the nanosecond they occur. We need to do these things in real time. So we're building these systems which effectively will stop errors consuming qubits, so qubits can actually do their job and actually unlock all these amazing applications that everyone speaks about. So that's essentially it in a nutshell, very quickly.
Thank you. Kirill, I'll come to you, and then Tom, I'm going to come to you with a different question.
No, I was going to add on a personal level. So I came to this country 30 years ago to do a PhD in physics at Cambridge, and happily finished my thesis. I got myself a job offer, and then my work permit was rejected because at the time UK was part of the EU, and you had to prove that you're better than anybody else in the EU to get the job in this country. So you would have thought that, PhD from Cambridge, all paid by the British government because I got myself 3 scholarships and yet rejected. Well, there is a happy end because it was overturned on the appeal because the company then hired a lawyer. But I mean, the story is that, as Sir Ian said, that it's not just about home-breed talent, it's also getting the best international talent, and what's important to keep them here in this country. Because again, happy end, I stayed here for 25 whatever years, paid my taxes, and now hopefully contributing to UK maintaining a leadership in one of the key areas for the future.
100%, thank you. Tom, I want to come back to the point that we've made here around, and I'm going to bring 3 things together. So emerging supply chains as we scale, the need to specialise, and also how we deliver strategic impact. And my question to you is, what does the UK need to develop out its supply chain? And I'm thinking of examples how in the EU, they're developing pilot lines across lots of different quantum modalities. Doesn't mean we need to do that, but what does the UK need to be able to scale?
So we have quite a detailed report on this question, actually, from the Royal Academy of Engineering from just over a year ago. And what it recognises is that currently we have an R&D supply chain in the UK, and that works really well for when you're sort of spinning up something in a university clean room. You're kind of passing forward like small numbers of devices for experimentation and prototyping. What that doesn't work for is when you want to get to scale. And so we need to look at the next generation of those facilities, and particularly, what we provide as a public good, as well as what, the commercial sector wants to invest in. And that might be a combination of upgrading what we have, or building new facilities. And it really does vary by, technology, part of the supply chain you're talking about. If you're talking about quantum computing, even the different qubit modalities might require certain different types of infrastructure. And we can't build it all in the UK, let's be realistic, and we don't need to. What we need to do is prioritise where we have particular strengths, and then also look at how we collaborate with like-minded partners and reduce barriers to access, so that we can ensure that we benefit from those supply chains from elsewhere. So that is something we kind of indicated in our industrial strategy we'd be bringing forward under our new programme. And we hope to say more about that in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you. We are getting very close to time, and I don't want to stand between you and a good lunch. But I've got one more question, and then I'm going to go to the panellists to wrap up. But just on that supply chain point, definitely recommend the Royal Academy of Engineering report. I think it's fantastic in terms of supply chains. And then also to add to that, how we work with similar technologies. So our semiconductor speciality in the UK and our photonics industry as well. Got some fantastic expertise. I can see Andy sitting here, who leads a lot on photonics. So my final question before we go to rounding up in, Andrew, I'll go to you on this. But if you didn't know, this is the International Year of Quantum, which means it's 100 years since the first major academic paper was published on quantum, and everything that we've done is based very much on those foundations. And it's a good opportunity to celebrate worldwide and in the UK about all that we have achieved and where we're going to go. How can we use this moment to build our strengths in the UK, and how important is this International Year of Quantum moment?
So it's always good to recognise development. It's always good to recognise progress, which is what the National Year of Quantum essentially is doing. It's shining the light on something which has laid the groundwork for not just quantum technology we're seeing now, but actually a lot of development over the last century. Like I mentioned earlier, lasers are a quantum technology at their core. That they wouldn't exist without the theories around quantum technology. So all of your high-speed internet, all of your laser discs, everything that comes out of that's all quantum. So where we are is a situation where we can shine a light on recognise the developments that have been done, but also set the direction for where we need to push forward and for the next sort of 100 years of quantum to push forward. But also try to figure out what's that next breakthrough, what's that next quantum equivalent that in 100, 200 years will be the groundwork of everything they're working towards.
Thank you. Okay, so we've had a very far-reaching conversation on what is a very complex topic if you're not part of this quantum community. So what I'm going to ask all of our speakers to do is, if you have to leave the audience with one message today, what would it be? And I'm going to work this way through the panel, which, sorry, I'm giving you a few controversial questions. But I'll start with you and we'll work this way. So what's the final message you'd like to leave the audience with?
It's probably quite a contradictory one. So I think we need collaboration and specialisation. Those are the two things. So we need to be very outward looking in what we're doing. We need to work, as we've said, with partners across international borders, industries and companies. Collaboration is absolutely key. These machines are going to get incredibly complex over the next 10 years. We can't do it by ourselves. And that means, therefore, we need to specialise in the UK. We need to pick those winners. I use that term with a little bit of a cringe because there aren't any winners in quantum. We all need to work together, and then the winners will be, well, the entire world, really.
Thank you.
Well, once again, the message from Tony Blair Institute that it's the UK's race to lose, and we need to act now because those companies are being bought by somebody else and going elsewhere, primarily because of the lack of capital. Capital plus, I would say, expertise from the VCs with dedicated funds. So what we need is larger amounts of money dedicated from the government directly to specialists like ourselves. Example, the largest fund in Europe is Quantination. That came from 20 million contribution from the French government, from BPI France, which attracted another 90 million from 70 investors, or maybe the other way around, maybe 9. Anyway, so the government purchasing as well as direct investments is not just a direct investment, it's also an indication that's in terms of their strategy support, that's exactly what we need in this country.
Thank you.
I think my message would be the government recognises the opportunity very clearly. Look at the industrial strategy for our ambition statement on this. We've made an initial commitment of £670 million for quantum computing. That isn't the last word. In the coming weeks and months, the government will be expanding on how we're spending that money to anchor critical capability in the UK and secure that leadership. And we'll be setting out more on what we're doing across other quantum technologies and across areas like infrastructure and skills, which we've discussed today. So look out for more from us.
In short, it's that quantum is only at the start. If you look back a bit over 100 years ago, before the creation of quantum, as it stands, the electron was discovered. When it's discovered, we didn't know what it was. It was a scientific curiosity, that was it. Everything that happens these days, everything in this room, everything that you do on a day-to-day basis is now enabled by the electron. Quantum is at the start of that journey. We're at the start of transitioning quantum theory into practice, but what that practice may end up giving, what that practice may end up delivering, we don't really know the scope of it yet. So we don't want to cut that short. So the support by the government, the support by VCs, and the ongoing work in the research community is vital to really make sure we can realise the potential and have the UK be the winner in this.
Thank you. And my final message will be is clearly we have fantastic expertise in quantum, not just in the UK, but on this stage as well. So please do reach out to our fantastic speakers. I am sure they would be very happy for a conversation and rely on their expertise because there's a lot that we can do together. So please do join me in thanking the speakers in the usual way.